Everyone in Maple Hollow shook their heads the day Clara announced she was building a church. The news spread through the town like wildfire, whispered in doorways, shouted across fences, and chuckled over the counter at Miller's General Store. "She's at it again, old Mrs. Whitaker muttered to anyone who would listen. Always got some wild idea in her head. The small town, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, had seen Clara grow up from a lively girl with dirt-streaked braids into a determined young woman with an unshakable glint in her eyes. She was known for her stubborn streak, but also for her uncanny ability to see things others couldn't. "Why waste your time?" asked Tom Fletcher, leaning against the fence with a crooked grin. He was the sort who found entertainment in everyone else's failures. No one's going to come to a church that pops up overnight. A few other townsfolk snickered, but Clara didn't answer. She had learned long ago that words were less powerful than actions. Clara began gathering materials, starting with old timber she salvaged from abandoned barns and crates from the nearby lumberyard. She scoured the hills for stones, carrying them back herself in burlap sacks, muscles straining, sweat running down her brow. Her hands grew raw and blistered, but she pressed on, her resolve steady as a mountain. Every morning before sunrise, she would check the worksite, hammer in nails with a rhythm that seemed almost musical, and adjust the beams with precision. Rain or shine, she showed up, working tirelessly while the town gossiped from a safe distance. Children would sneak peeks from behind the tall oak trees lining the dusty road, curious but cautious. "Why is she doing it alone?" little Emma would whisper to her brother, wide-eyed. "It's too big, and she's too small." Her brother shrugged, unsure, but the fascination lingered. Clara's work became a spectacle for the young ones, a story they would later recount at bedtime about a woman who dared to build something with her own hands, a structure that seemed to grow taller each week. But not everyone watched in awe. Some teenagers, fueled by boredom and the thrill of mischief, would toss mud at the partially built walls or leave sticks in the foundation trenches, hoping to slow her down. One day, a barrel of paint went missing, and rumors spread that it was some prank by the boys from the other side of town. Clara caught them one evening, mud-smeared and sheepish, hiding behind a pile of stones. Instead of scolding, she merely shook her head, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Next time, you could help instead of hinder," she said, and the boys, embarrassed and impressed, slowly began to understand that her strength wasn't just in muscle, it was in her unflinching calm. Neighbors muttered, "She's wasting her life," but Clara ignored them. She had a vision that stretched far beyond Maple Hollow's narrow streets. Her church wasn't just a building, it was a promise, a hope, a place where people could gather, where hearts could find shelter even in the coldest storms of life. Every plank she lifted, every stone she set, was a brick in that promise. By mid-morning, she would pause, wiping her brow, looking at the structure as it began to take shape. The first wall leaned upright, then the second, then the roof beams stretched out like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. Birds perched on the rafters, chirping as if in approval, and the wind whistled through the beams, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. Clara often stood there quietly, listening, feeling as if the world itself was watching her, waiting to see if she would falter. And though the town laughed and whispered, there was something quietly magnetic about her determination. People began to notice that no matter the mockery or the obstacles, she never quit. She found joy in small victories, a wall standing straight, a window frame perfectly aligned, a patch of sunlight streaming through the incomplete roof. Her laughter, rare and bright, echoed across the site when something went right, a sound so unexpected that even the skeptics couldn't help but pause. Weeks turned into months, and Clara's solitary labor transformed the skeletal framework of wood and stone into a small but striking church. The building rose like a quiet defiance against the skeptics, with its single steeple piercing the sky and wide, welcoming doors that seemed to beckon the world in. By now, the townspeople could no longer ignore the worksite entirely, though most still walked past with arms crossed, murmuring critiques. Some grudgingly admitted it looked sturdy, even beautiful, but pride kept their voices low. The church stood on the highest hill in Maple Hollow, overlooking the cluster of homes below. Clara often climbed the hill at dawn, brushing dew from the grass, lighting the lantern inside, and watching the town wake up beneath her. She imagined the people inside, seated on wooden benches, listening to words of hope or finding peace in quiet prayer. She envisioned children laughing in the garden she planned to plant and neighbors sharing bread and stories by candlelight. For her, this church was more than a project, it was a heartbeat she could offer her town. Then, one morning, the sky began to darken with a strange urgency. Clouds thickened unnaturally fast, swelling with menace, and the wind began to whip the treetops like a frenzied sea. By noon, Maple Hollow was gripped by a storm the likes of which no one could remember. Rain hammered rooftops, turning streets into rivers, and the normally gentle river swelled angrily, threatening to overflow. Trees bent and snapped, their trunks crashing to the ground with deafening thuds. Roofs lifted like paper, carried away by violent gusts. Panic spread through the town, and families scrambled to higher ground, clutching children, livestock, and whatever possessions they could carry. Amid the chaos, eyes turned to the hill where Clara's church stood. The small building, still incomplete in some parts, somehow looked steadfast against the storm. Lightning struck in jagged lines, illuminating the lone figure at the doorway, Clara herself, soaked, hair plastered to her face, lantern held high, arms wide. "This way," she shouted over the roar of the wind, her voice clear and commanding. Families froze for a heartbeat, then ran, slipping through mud and debris, toward the light. Inside, the church was a sanctuary. Water seeped in around the edges, but the main hall remained dry, the wooden floor firm beneath their trembling feet. Clara ushered people to the pews, offered blankets, and reassured frightened children with soft words and gentle hands. The warmth of lanterns and firewood stacked in the corner contrasted sharply with the raging storm outside. It was as if the church itself had absorbed Clara's resolve, standing strong because she had poured her sweat and heart into every plank, every stone, every nail. Neighbors who had mocked her, who had whispered that she was wasting her time, now huddled in silence, awestruck. They watched her move gracefully among the crowd, calming panic, comforting the scared, and tending to the elderly. One by one, they realized that what they had laughed at, what they had dismissed as a fool's errand, had become their lifeline. Children clutched their mothers' hands and whispered stories of the lady on the hill who had built a church all alone. Hours passed, but the storm showed no mercy. Windows rattled, the wind howled like a living thing, and the river threatened to breach its banks. Yet inside, the church held firm. Families began to share what little food they had brought, trading bread for warmth, hugs for comfort. Clara, exhausted but steady, moved from group to group, listening, laughing softly, keeping the air calm with her presence. For the first time, the townspeople saw the full weight of her efforts, the hours in sun and rain, the solitary labor, the unwavering belief. After the storm passed, Maple Hollow was a changed place. The streets were littered with broken branches, mud, and debris, yet a quiet awe lingered over the town. Families emerged cautiously from their damaged homes, still clutching children and pets, and instinctively made their way up the hill to Clara's church. The small building, which had once been the source of ridicule, now stood as a symbol of safety and hope. Its walls, still glistening with raindrops, seemed to glow in the morning sun, reflecting the gratitude and newfound respect in the eyes of the townspeople. Children who had once snickered at Clara now followed her eagerly, offering to help sweep the floors, arrange benches, and tidy the garden she had begun planting months ago. They watched her carefully, absorbing every movement, every gentle word, every patient smile. Some of the older children even carried stones and timber, remembering the hours Clara had spent alone lifting and shaping the building. Their laughter no longer carried mockery, it carried admiration, a shared pride in the sanctuary that had saved them. Neighbors, too, began to change. Tom Fletcher, the man who had once leaned against the fence and sneered, brought a wheelbarrow of supplies. "Figured you might need a hand," he said awkwardly, setting down sacks of grain and nails at her feet. Mrs. Whitaker, the town gossip who had loudly predicted Clara's failure, arrived carrying blankets and warm food for the families who had spent the night in the church. Each arrival was tentative at first, a test of humility, but as they saw Clara greet them with warmth and gratitude, their doubts melted away. They began to understand that this church was more than wood and stone, it was a reflection of Clara's spirit. The church quickly became the heart of Maple Hollow. Where once it had been a source of skepticism, it now hosted weekly gatherings, small celebrations, and nightly prayers. The pews, polished and orderly, were often filled with families sharing stories, offering comfort, and finding strength in each other's presence. Clara never asked for recognition or praise, but the town couldn't help but notice her influence. She moved quietly through the space, offering encouragement to children struggling with their lessons, comforting the elderly, and listening to young couples planning their futures. Her patience and kindness set a new standard for the town, a reminder that leadership often comes not through loud words, but through quiet, steadfast action. Even the skeptics began to change in ways they hadn't anticipated. Farmers who had doubted the usefulness of the church now held weekly community meetings there, planning shared projects and pooling resources. The teens who had once tormented Clara now helped her maintain the building, painting walls and repairing benches, realizing that their energy could be used to build rather than destroy. The church became a workshop of collaboration, a place where the entire town could contribute, and in doing so, discover a shared purpose and pride. Clara herself remained humble. She would often step back and watch the town, smiling quietly as children played near the garden, neighbors shared bread, and elderly couples found solace in the quiet corners of the sanctuary. She never demanded recognition for the work she had done alone. She understood that the true value of the church was measured not in praise, but in the lives it touched. Every laugh, every shared meal, every tear wiped away within those walls was a testament to her vision and perseverance. Time passed, and the legend of Clara's church grew. New families moving into Maple Hollow heard stories of the determined woman who had built a church by herself and had, in doing so, saved the town. Visitors often paused at the hill, marveling at the small building that had once seemed so improbable. And while Clara remained modest, the townspeople never forgot the lesson she had imparted, that strength, courage, and belief in a vision could create something enduring, something that could shelter a community through the storms of life, both literal and metaphorical. Maple Hollow had learned to respect her, yes, but more importantly, they had learned to believe in the power of one person's unwavering determination. The church stood as a constant reminder that sometimes, the thing others laugh at is the very thing that holds the world together when it is threatened. And in that realization, the town found not only safety, but unity, hope, and a newfound reverence for the quiet, persistent power of belief. Clara had not just built a church, she had built a legacy. This expanded Part 3, approximately 700 words, emphasizes the transformation of Maple Hollow, the town's collective growth, and Clara's enduring influence. If you like, I can now create hyper-realistic image prompts for all 3 parts, so you could visualize Clara's journey from ridicule to reverence. Do you want me to do that?